most of us over here would have already used ChatGPT, where you type a request and you get a response back. Now, hold that picture for a moment and just imagine agentic development or the agents, they're just one step beyond it. Basically, you write something and it acts. That is, you tell him a goal that you want to fix a bug. It will try to find the files, which to edit. It will check the code base, it will run the tests, and it will keep on continuing iterating until it gets either stuck or it finds or like completes the solution. So the difference basically between an AI tool and an AI agent lies between this loop. And that's what we are going to discuss it today as well. So hello everyone, welcome to this panel, a panel discussion for AI for code generation, which is we are going to talk about the agentic development, the hype, the reality, and what's next for it. And for that, we have our amazing panelists with us. We have Chaitanya, who is from Atlassian. We have Nattu, the CEO of Code Walnut. We have Apurva from Procore, and we have Rishabh from Ford Pro. Please give a huge round of applause to welcome these panelist members. Now, to begin with, when we say agentic development, what's the simplest, honest definition that we can think of? And where exactly or how far is that loop actually closing today versus what the marketing implies? Who wanna take this up?
Yep. So to simply define agentic development, I would say it is to delegate the software development work that we used to do by hand to an agent. And when I say an agent, it's like a model plus harness. So it's just a fancy term that means like something that can act on its own, can plan on its own, and also can verify on its own. So that's the most simplest definition that I can think of. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I think always find it very difficult to define what agentic is, and I was just thinking about it since morning. And first of all, I'm no subject matter expert in agentic. I don't think any of us are yet. Everything is just super new for everybody. Yeah. So just figuring things out. So yeah, at least from what I've seen so far, or at least the challenges that we are trying to figure out with agentic, I think we've seen different kinds of agentic developments. One is synchronous agentic development, one is async agentic development, and another is autonomous agentic development. And I think these are the three phases where we are trying to figure out how we can leverage agentic development in all three different areas. Synchronous is where you're doing a lot of back and forth with an agent with a harness on your local. Asynchronous is where you probably have something running in your CI. It's not one shot yet. You're asking it to do something. It did something. It comes back to you. Hey, can you check? Did I do the right thing? And you're talking back again and doing a lot of back and forth. And autonomous is where we just have a goal. You ask it to chase that goal, and it will go one-shotted. Maybe it'll take multiple shots, but for you, it'll just be a one-shot thing. You asked it to do something, it did it, and it's done. So yeah, I think it's a long journey for all of us to figure out.
Yeah. So now since you talked about the three phases of agentic development, now when we think about having it or onboarded the agentic development, it seems like quite a magic that using this development, agentic development, we can build anything and achieve anything. But that is kind of true when it's like a clean, tiny code base. But when you talk about the monoliths or the code base which is 10 years old, having a lot of complexity, like the one which Chaitanya talked about yesterday, so much complexity, so much interdependency. Now in that case, how do you think agentic development fits into place, and how exactly can this messy code be traversed through and utilized for a better?
So that's part of the nature of problems. Are you able to hear me okay? So that's the nature of problems that at Code Walnut we are tackling. So I can tell we are in the process of dealing with that and some learnings, right? So first thing is one needs to do some development work to make a massive repository become ready for agentic improvements, feature addition and stuff like that. And then it's one thing to deploy an agent, but then whatever work we produce, right, it has to be production ready, enterprise grade. So there are those aspects. Now, if with very less thinking, when we toss in an agent or offer, infuse AI powered development into a repository, a lot of AI, what they call slop, AI bloat, all that emerges. So we need, and in fact, there is a role to play for us to apply our minds to come and make the repository ready for agentic velocity. So one of the things, we have just written a one pager for a client where we've said we will make documentation clarity in every module. So every module will carry a .md file which describes the expected behaviors, the architectural choices made, so that an agent can come in and understand and work on that. And also, instead of going a big bang, okay, overnight we'll switch over to agentic, another approach we are taking is, let's take all the sonar report, and one by one, every warning will be fixed by the agent, PR will be raised, and then, so we are biting away at reducing tech debt.
Yeah, but this is that you have to do extra work to make your whole code base agentic ready. Now, if we just talk about what exactly, or like what the current state our code base already is in, what do you think the agentic agents handle better, and where do you think it's still like a long shot that without doing anything, it's not going to work?
If you look at your quality gates, the earliest ones are about, at the developer level, the linting should be done. We don't reveal any secrets in the code before we commit into the source code repository. Stuff like that, there's a lot of, you can infuse AI into it very effortlessly, even in a messy code base. It's when you choose to refactor a module, when you bite something bigger, when you're going up the value chain, unless you have done all these guardrails, unless you have added all this context into your agent, it is failing for us. That's been our experience. I don't know if you have had any other experience.
I think you have like the points which you are making right now. It's totally valid. Even before the agent needs to do something, the repos needs to be supportive of that. As per my experience, if you are going, and that's where like my talk was about, like with respect to migrations, when you're doing a large scale migrations, your test cases needs to be pre-built, like to have that foundational like quality gate, like okay, this needs to be passed even when I move it or do a large scale migration or large scale update. So those foundations that we talked about, hey, writing test cases is so boring and everything, those are kind of like the quality gates right now. And if you have not done the work, your code base is kind of like not ready. And also coming, like I would quote Chetan as like Atlassian being such a huge product, right? Having a single monorepo for entirety, you can't just do that like and think of Atlassian going down because some code got messed up. That's an implication throughout the entire Atlassian softwares which we use on a day-to-day basis. So we have to be ready. Like the code has to be ready before even you move towards that direction.
So now when you're talking about that, making the code base ready, we have context files and we have the prompting. How do we like generate the prompts? Now, what exactly do you think everyone should kind of like be aware of that? What sort of prompts do they write, or how the context should be built? What all should be there in the context so that the AIs can actually go through those files, understand what it needs to be done, and rather than hallucinating, they know what straight that I need to go this way, and that's how it needs to be done.
So I'd like to add my 2 cents to that. So diving a little deeper on the previous question itself, right? So you need to have certain files which are like agent.md, claude.md if you're using Claude, right? And the way you build it is keep that MD file small, but have context pointers, meaning create a docs folder. In that, add separate modules in which you define how exactly your code base is. Because what happens is, if you don't do that, it will just go through high level and assume a lot of things. And especially in monolith closed code bases, there are lots of different patterns being followed, right? So it's very much important to note that, especially that for this module we are not following this. For this module is different. That those kind of things are really important. Apart from that, create skills. Right? How do you do development in your own company? It's very much native to your company, right? So you have to add skills for that. As I told you about design system skill, it can be for backends. For it can be an API skill. So create skills for that. And to me, it's less of what do you write on prompt, more of how you build the context. So that in prompt, you just have to say, this is a ticket, implement it. I mean, we are not there yet. We will make time for that. We have to make our code bases AI native for that, right? So yeah, that's what I would say.
Can I add something? So I'll just sort of show you the other side of this problem, what we faced with Atlassian. So I'll merge both last two questions of yours and try to answer it. So with Atlassian, the code base is so massive. It's 15 million lines of code. Imagine that being a context for AI. AI is just lost. No idea what to do. So there is no possibility that AI can understand such a large code base, still still maintain context and still be affordable in the first place. So we have to really think about how to make the code base agentic ready. A part of that was what my talk was about yesterday, to decouple the dependency graph so that AI doesn't go too deep into the depths of dependency and gets lost. Another is sort of building the right context for AI to navigate, and that's the bandwagon that we jumped onto. That hey, we need agent.md, we need skills, and we were absolutely sure that this is the right way to go ahead. And if you know how skills work, right? Whenever you do an agent invocation, all the names and the descriptions of the skills are loaded into memory. Now, guess what happens when there are 600 plus developers contributing to a single repo, adding new skills? We have, I think, 100, 120 skills that are in the repo. And all of
I
those
was
skills,
kind of thinking it would be like more than 1,000 looking at the code mix.
we tried to limit it. We tried to stop it before it gets a lot worse. And now all of those skills are loaded into agentic memory. Who's benefiting from this? Probably OpenAI, Claude, not us. So there's a cost that you have to pay when you build a lot of those skills as well. So you need to really rethink about what skills are important, what aren't. And especially with the legacy code base, like Atlassian, we don't do yarn test. We do AFM test. And that's such a small, stupid thing. But agents will keep trying to do yarn test, yarn test, yarn test. And imagine the number of tokens we burn just for that one small thing. And that's not just a nuance for testing, that's a nuance for everything. We do everything in a very special, different way. And now we have to teach all of that to our agents, which is challenging and expensive. We don't have an answer yet, but those are the directions that we are thinking about. That we also don't want to add a lot of junk to AI so that it doesn't get too confused either. So still figuring that out.
One solution which I did come across when we were solving for the large code base was the Graphify, or like graph-based local vector DB, which you could utilize and kind of like point the code, like let's say method A calls method B.
The dependency.
The entire dependency graph, you can kind of like get it without any very challenging way, and it does really good job. It does take a longer time to create that dependency graph in the first time, but yeah, the first time is a very time-taking process, but after that, it's really good output, which we saw. But compared to like the code base of 15 million line code, I think that would be a very big challenge. I have not tested it, so I can't comment on that.
I've seen the dependency graph and it's bad.
So you have gotten the screenshot and pasted it. The actual
I actually
dependency.
had a dependency graph. It is just
You
so
had on like the normal one. I had the real one. That's
yeah. The real one was just a youth circle and like filled with colors. You can't make out anything because everything is just lines, lines, lines.
But the dependencies graph did give us few instances where like the code is that no one is using, like the entire code base is not using that. So we were able to eliminate those very easily and attack the ones which we needed to like migrate off. So yeah.
I feel like one of the best and the worst part about this AI is it's super confident. Even it's going to do like wrong thing, it's going to be reasonable and so logical that, see, this is the issue and this is why it's happening, irrespective of what the actual issue is. Maybe like it's a one line fix and we'll do like whole 5 to 6 file changes and we'll be so confident. And even like if you continue asking it, it still hallucinate and still say the same thing. So how do your companies kind of like tackle these things, these super confident, wrong evaluation of the AI? And how do you make sure that a human reviewer stays in place to make sure that such things, because like we have like automated a lot of things, like even in my company Rippling, we have like a lot of automations. We just tell the agent that, okay, raise the PR for this fix. And without human review, I feel that there's still a lot of chances where like an issue can be fixed, like sent to the production, and it can like totally stop, like cause issues. So how does your companies do it?
So we've enjoyed that space a lot. So we've dabbled in this a lot. We've seen all the crazy thing that you're plus one to everything you said. It happens. But we sat down and said the other side is also true. If just humans are writing and they're waiting for another human to review, we are also waiting on that. And that doesn't happen at all. And there's a LGTM and it sneaks in, right? There's hardly any investment or commitment made. So we kind of, we built our own review agent, like I call it a harness at this point, because we lean on the available models. So we called it Merge Mitra and said, our job is not to be a Greptile or a Code Rabbit, but let's do a tool that will enable us to merge with confidence. And so we started to see that we've looked at my CTO, Ben, is the prime mover of the quality engineering in the company. Like he stands for every line to be code reviewed. And through that, we've learned a lot. So we went and scanned all our past PRs, pulled out some patterns, and said, we'll feed this into Merge Mitra as context. And then we also adopted a very interesting scoring rubric, almost like your Lighthouse scores, right? You can have a LCP, Lighthouse scores on first time LCP and all of that, and CLS. So we said we'll do a review with a scoring pattern, which will look at code quality, test quality, NFR quality, and repository specific quality. So you can inject things in this repository. We want only coarse-grained APIs. We don't want data manipulation in the front end. So we educate that. So now you get another LLM to do that analysis for you using our guiding rules and create PR scores. So PR score of 90 plus has the engineer smiling. PR score 70 and low, you got to go and work on it. And if it's a refactor, and even if it's 90 plus, we had the human review it, you review it. So it was kind of fun. I think there's no one answer, but eventually you learn. And see, the fact is, it's not that the LLM is throwing bad solutions all the time. It's just that we are lazy not teaching it what good looks like. You invest in teaching it what good looks like, you can harvest more better fixes from that infinite brain.
The other thing which like I have been doing for some time now, and that did give me very good results, like the outcome from the agents and everything else. So in normal software development, we are doing like test-driven development, right? So for agentic, if you want to know that, okay, how to score that the results which are coming out are like accurate and everything, we write evals. So what I've started is writing evals first, like, hey, these are the outputs which I'm desiring over here, and then kind of like developing the agent. So the deterministic of the agent has gone increased. Like I'm seeing very, very good results and better results around that. It did help me out in few of the agents which I have developed. But yeah, the evals-driven development has helped me in determinism.
Just to add plus one to both. So we also do the verification part of any implementation. It is deterministic. We keep it programmatic. So we have scripts, we have tests, we rely on lint, we rely on anything which is deterministic, which will always give the same output, right? So verification has to be deterministic. Write scripts for that. Don't rely on LLM. Right? Is it good? Are you sure? If you ask him, it will always say, yeah, I'm pretty sure. So, and another thing is, we also have our own code review agent. And earlier I used to think, why does company build their own code review agent? Like just use Graptile or CodeRabbit or something. But thing is, in our agent, it has specific context of our company, of our product, and also we fed previous vulnerabilities issues, previous Sev1 issues to it, so that it can identify that this should not happen. So that context, I don't think Graptile or anything might have. So yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Do you have any point to add?
Yeah, I think just as long as AI is the foundational core of AI is probability. So as long as it's based on probability, non-determinism, you need to have deterministic checks in place to ensure your code is protected. And then on top of that, you can leverage AI to sort of, at least that's the direction that we are trying to head towards, is have deterministic checks in place, let them fail, let a non-deterministic agent go in, try to fix those checks, and then see if your deterministic checks go green, and then you can merge your PR.
The one thing I think, Shweta, you've asked, and I don't think we have done a justice to that, is about the fix quality, right? You're saying you can go roundabout, fix 5 files, but you should have one line of code can
Yeah.
change it. I think that we notice and we laugh and correct, but there's no systematic way of weeding it out. I think it's still out there. Yeah, it's still possible.
Because this has been like we've tried even the automated, the with the agents, the automations, and even with like the Claude curses and everything like locally as well. And you feed some data into it. It though already has the context, but it somehow kind of like goes and tries to do something. Will do like whole lot of handling, which could have been done just like by changing the flag value. That okay, just change the flag value to true, or just put that value variable, and thing would have been fixed. But we'll like create the whole new file, do whole evaluation, maybe network line, wherever it will go, and get it done.
Gives a good ego boost to the senior engineer, right? I'm smarter, still not caught up.
Yeah. So one very interesting thing that we encountered with this, and I think a lot of people will as well, is we sort of had these agents.mds skills, whatever, right, to help agents understand what the code base looks like. And obviously, we used AI to build those agent.mds. And hey, this is what the package structure looks like. This is where this belongs. This is how the dependency graph is. And then yesterday, everything that I spoke about, we did huge refactors, changing packages from here and there. Things that were there before are now here. And now suddenly everyone's AI agents are lost because you told me this was the package structure, but this isn't. This is suddenly something different. So this is the harness drift, which your code base is a living beast, right? It's evolving over time. But your agent.mds, your skills, they are not. They are static. So there are a lot of solutions out there, even Anthropic, OpenAI, they're all proposing these solutions to harness drifts, how you can have memories and how you can just have agents who scan through your repository over time and keep updating your agent.mds and skills. But I think that's something to keep in mind, that your code base is not static. So your agents.mds and your skills can't be static either.
One of the conflict I also see like in my company, or like maybe with like talking to my friends, that now with the AI into the company, into the place, there's a conflict between like the product managers who are like wanting to ship things super fast, and then they're like the platform teams who want to stabilize the whole structure, maybe like refactoring, clean up the old legacy code, clean up the mess. So how do this conflict can actually be resolved, making sure that okay, products can be shipped faster, but the main thing like the platform which needs to be stabilized can also be taken care of. You are this
I am
better position.
well. See,
It all comes down like from the CEO that we want this.
yeah, I think this problem existed even before AI. It's a universal problem. Actually, AI is supposed to offer the solution now that I don't have. See, if you've actually doubled or tripled engineering capacity, quietly you can serve the product managers, requirements and do tech debt cleanup and platform stabilization potentially in parallel. That's the promise AI offers. So I go pitch to clients that, hey, your engineering teams, you always get told that you're a bottleneck, right? Your product team wants a lot more, right? Call Code Walnut and we'll make engineering abundant. Bottleneck turns into abundance. So honestly, I feel this challenge must be solved. It's not fair for us to go and say, hey, we are platform team, we are tight, strengthening the platform, we can't give you features. that's the relic of the old era. With AI, give them a roadmap that okay, I'm fixing my repository, making it agent ready, whatever. But in parts, you go give your CTO assurance that while the product owner wanted 5 features, I delivered 7, but I did reduce all those warnings and so down, and it's much better now. Or like Chaitanya was talking about, reduce the tax you pay for CI/CD. So should be doable. I don't. It's not fair to come and argue like, hey, I need time for platform now. I feel.
Yeah, true.
So I've been in platform teams almost all of my career, and this is not a new problem. We've always debated that, hey, why should we fund platform when we could be shipping features instead? So you always, from a platform perspective, you always have to make sure that whatever you're doing is adding value. You can't just say that I'm doing tech debt cleanup, I'm refactoring the code base. Like, what is the dollar value attached to the work that you're doing? Is the platform work that I'm doing, is it going to enable me to ship 2x more features in the next 6 months? Is it going to enable me to save cost for my entire company? If you can't quantify the value that you're adding doing the platform work, it's probably not worth doing.
What? Sorry.
So I have seen the opposite problem. Like the engineers have been delivering faster than we want requirements faster from PM. So then we had to do a workshop to train them to enable with AI to create PRDs and Jiras and all with AI. But not just product UX also, how to use AI and stuff. Means they know how to use AI, but like how to use it in productive way so that they can give the better artifacts, which will actually help us. So I have seen the opposite thing.
I wanted to just give a big thumbs up to what Chaitanya said. If there's one skill we must learn as engineer, we all talking about foundation skills, AI skills and all that, fundamentals, but the ability to articulate the business value of the feature I'm building or the fix I'm making. None of us are anywhere remotely able to do that. Very few are. I attended a conference where one engineering manager was passionately explaining how you articulate a Jira ticket to dollar value. So it was beautiful. That's a skill, if you want to take away from the room, that you need to figure that out. I attended a session and I took pictures of every slide. I'm going to give it to Claude and say, rebuild that deck for me. And if it comes out well, I'll publish it. But definitely keep an eye out to learn that skill.
Looking at the time, like I have a last question, like all of you, maybe like in 1 or 2 lines. Now everyone is going to be back at the jobs on Monday. Now, what is one thing which you advise them to do and what not to do when it comes about the agentic development? Maybe start learning or stop doing it. One line from each.
I'll go last.
Okay, sure.
Two things. One is, if you are not adopting AI, start adopting AI. I believe everyone in this room at least is adopting, but like if you're not, you can start adopting. Second, while adopting AI, don't leave the fundamentals and the basically it can be for front end or back end, like whatever fundamentals are there. Because especially for people who are young, who are just graduating, I mean, they are really good with AI, but they need to also be good, having good judgment. So that's what I would say.
Mine would be start looking for the breadth now. AI is giving you the depth. Breadth would be much more important for the later period of the time. And yeah, that's more or less here.
I think we've just been engineers for so many years, and our technical expertise has been our bread and butter, right? The deeper of a technical engineer you are, the more valuable you are. If you know React core fundamentals, you're an amazing engineer. If you know how hooks work, you're amazing. React server components, so that's so cool. You're such a valuable asset to the team. But now that has become table stakes. I think that has just become baseline for all of us, where you don't need to know how it works, but you need to understand how you can leverage it to reach the end goal that you're trying to achieve. So continue doing that. Continue leveraging the fundamentals of engineering, but also start thinking about stealing from Natu's talk yesterday, that how your role is changing now as an engineer. How can you become more of an orchestrator and figure out how to do different things at the same time, add more value instead of just going technically deep. Think about what you're building, why you're building, rather than just how you're building it. I think that's probably my takeaway.
Yeah, that's fine. Please go.
So I kind of suggest 2, 3 things, guys. One, get a sexy GitHub profile. You got to be impressing with your GitHub public profile. I find everyone I meet, oh, I've done great work. Sit down and talk to you. You have a lot of ideas, a lot of value. But today, right, if I need to see who's a top shot engineer, the 3, 4 people around me, I'll go talk to them and say, can you help solve a problem for me? But many others are like, unless we sit down and interact with you, we will not know you're great. You have some capability, make a great GitHub profile. Before everyone say, I'm busy, work's coming in the way. Now in 2 hours with Claude Code, you can put your best quality code in front of me, right? It's very important for each of us to be a powerhouse. That with AI, we are powerful. What do I know? You know, Smile Gupta was talking about payments. I want to meet her and ask if she can she can become the world's payment doctor. Write a context file, write all the 20 errors that can happen. Say you guys can import this into your LLM, train your LLM and it'll troubleshoot. Or I'll come in and solve payment problems in 2 hours, any company, anywhere. We'll worry about commercial later. But she can stand up and be the guru of payments now. How much depth she had yesterday, right? So that is one. The second is, I'd say, add one ritual to your life that you didn't have. Like meeting 2 friends, staring in front of Claude Code and running a Claude Admiration Society. Right? You just go build together Claude fan club. I'd love to launch one if anyone's interested. Every Sunday evening, we sit down and admire Codex and Claude and critique them. And they're brilliant. Can I harness some of that brilliance to so you will actually build skills that you wouldn't have thought of earlier. We're like, alone I'll doom scroll, but in front of you will be embarrassed to do that. I like to do something. So yeah, that's the other thing. Add a ritual.
That was amazing. So guys, please make sure once you like go home, update your GitHub profiles, make sure it's like the powerhouse and it tells exactly everyone that what you can do and let people know what exactly, how good and how great you are. Thank you so much. It was great like having you over here. And
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Lovely session.
Thank you.